Tom, our next question is kind of a follow-up from Julian's question about love, and that is, what is fear like? This is what you describe as the opposite of love. What is fear like in other realities, and how does that work? I know that love and that emotion is of caring is the ideal. What is the fear element in these other realities? Is that different as well?
Yes, of course, it's different in the way those beings actualize their environment. It's different. They may not have grizzly bears or lions and tigers. The things they fear, are maybe different kinds of things, but fear is always there, and fear basically comes, just like love basically is talking about caring and sharing and cooperation. Fear is always about self. It's always about me. I have fears. I don't like this. It's not, you talk about, well, it's not me. I just have fear for my children. Well, yes, you are concerned with how your children turn out, but basically that fear is based on how shattered, upset, and whatever you would be if something terrible happened to your children. It's still about you. It's not the way you want it. You don't want bad things to happen to your children, but that's you and your wants and your needs. So we tend to put that on other people and say, well, I'm just fearful for my children. But no, you're fearful that your children won't have all the advantages and opportunities that you want them to have. So it's really your fear. Just like we say, George makes me angry. Well, George doesn't really make you angry. He triggers your fear and you get angry because of your fear. So we tend to put our feelings on somebody else when they really belong on us. So fear in that way is much like love. It is what it is, and it gets expressed differently in all cultures and all reality frames. It's going to be expressed differently depending on the beliefs of the characters there. So that's how it works. And that's true of dogs and cats and horses as well, and foxes and raccoons. They have beliefs, things that they believe to be true. They believe that humans are dangerous. So when they can, they run away from humans. Sometimes they believe that humans might be helpful. So you'll have a wild animal walks up to a human and says, please pull this can off of my head, I'm stuck. So it's just different beliefs. So it's the beliefs that people have that generate their cultural beliefs, generally generate their religious beliefs as well, at least a big part of their religious beliefs. Fear comes from a looking at the world in a negative way rather than a positive way. What's going to happen to me that I don't want to happen, that I'm afraid will happen? And if this happens, this will be terrible for me. So it's a self-centered, but you're looking at the negative side of the possibilities. Now, that's not necessarily always fearful. People should look at both positive and negative possibilities, but it's different when you just look at them and assess them and say, oh, this could happen and that could happen. Oh, this would be a bad thing. This would be a good thing. But fearing them is something else. That's when you take it on as, oh no, if this happens, it'll be horrible. And you kind of dwell in that negativity. You're not just looking at it and saying, well, this is something bad that I'd like to avoid. So I'm not going to go out in the woods today because the grizzly bears are in mating season and they're very territorial. So I'll stay in now. Okay, that's assessing the negative possibilities and coming to a choice. But if then instead you go, oh, the bears, they may come and get me, and you're afraid and you have to go out in the woods. Well, you go out in the woods with fear and you will smell like prey to a bear because you have all this fear. Whereas if you don't have that fear, you may be able to walk by the bear, use your air horn and your pepper spray because you're prepared, because you're intelligent, and survive. if you panic and run, you're not raising your probability of survival very much. You're lowering it because you make yourself look and smell like prey. Anyhow, the point is, fear is when we dwell in the negative, when we make choices based on that negative rather than based on our intelligent assessment of what's the best way to deal with something negative. That's different. That's not fear. So fear is not just being aware of what's threatening. Fear is something else. That threatening becomes personal. That threatening isn't just something out there that you have to deal with. It's a personal thing. A lot of people are afraid of the unknown. That afraid of the unknown often centers around being afraid of death, the fear of death, because death is unknown, what happens next, or they don't want to give up what they've got now. Anyhow, that's a big fear that a lot of people have, but a lot of people are just fear of the unknown. That's why they're afraid of things that are different. And it's not just humans doing this, cattle are like that too, and deer or, animals are like that too. If you have an antelope born into a herd and it's pink instead of brown, the other animals will disassociate it. They won't breed with it. They won't help it. They kind of ostracize it from their group because it's different, because they've learned that if it's different, it's not good. Yeah. It's scary because it's unknown. It's a not knowing is the problem. It's the fear of the unknown. So that's across all sorts of species have this fear of the unknown. People have it, and people probably get into it a lot more than the other animals do because we have this thing that we can ruminate over things, and pretty soon we can build these fears up in our mind to be huge when they're really not, because we tend to think about them and worry about them and so on. And all of that, of course, makes the probability just greater that bad thing is going to happen. So yes, fear is part of consciousness. It's consciousness dwelling in the negative, consciousness making a poor choice, the choice to fear rather than just to act intelligently.
We are just consciousness, whether it's this reality or the other realities we were speaking of. It's potential for love and fear. And that's common to all kinds of beings, whether that's ritual is part of it or the circumstances, the environment is different. We are basically consciousness making choices out of either love or fear.
Right. And we happen to be herd animals as well. Now, I say that kind of tongue in cheek. You don't talk about a bunch of humans together as a herd, but we are social animals. We have cultures. We have social beliefs. And those social beliefs often give us fears. Sometimes they give us good things. Sometimes they give us bad things. It just depends on the belief of that specific culture. So, yes, we come in and some fears and beliefs are just handed to us because we're in a particular culture. And we have to deal with that. If we're in a culture that gives us lots and lots of fear, well, our job is to deal with that and deal well with it. That may be difficult, but that's our opportunity. That's our choice as to how we deal with that.
Well, those are the challenges of other realities, having different ways of doing things and different ways of seeing things. That, I guess, is part of the plan of diversity that we are challenged with. And other realities, they're experiments. This is one reality that operates this way. Another reality would operate a different way as far as how does that work? How does love and fear work in that environment? So it's a matter of just different ways of doing things, which gives the LCS more diversity of experience. But as That's far true. As these other realities, whether love and fear operate differently, similarly, or whatever, it's consciousness what we are as fundamentally consciousness and how we choose that
Yes.
really
Now, maybe
brings
it's
us
just worth
forward.
mentioning why there are different realities.
Mm.
You kind of skirted across that there. That the reason we have these different virtual realities is not just one virtual reality. Is basically the larger conscious system is not going to put all of its eggs in just one basket. It's going to go for some diversity to see which ways, if you start with what initial conditions, what do you end up with and how does it grow? How does it evolve? Is it better to have something that's really, really tough, or is it better to have something that's easier? So what sort of things help consciousness evolve the most? So just saying, well, I got one thing and that's it, I'm done, that doesn't make much sense. It's going to say, well, let's try it this way and that way and the other way and see how they all work. Now, yes, they're all going to be different. They're all going to have beings that are played by consciousness, that it's interacting. It's all the mechanics are the same, but the conditions are different. The environment's different. The beliefs are different for different reasons. So we're in the one we're in, and there's other things perking along too. And they all have basic similarity in that they all are there to make choices. It's a reality frame with a rule set that allows them to make more significant and meaningful choices than just hanging out in the chat room. But it's going to make different virtual realities just to see what works best. How do people evolve in these conditions or those conditions? And that way it understands the nature of its own evolution. It sees, how things work. So think of the larger conscious system as also a scientist wanting to understand itself and how it works. How does consciousness evolve in various virtual realities? So that's why there are these different reality systems, and they're all perking along in their own way. Some of them de-evolve greatly, some of them don't. Some of them just keep chugging on. Probably some are quicker than others. I don't have the details and when they were all started and what progress they've each made. That's not information that's necessary for me to know. So that's never been given to me. It just is what it is. We just need to pay attention to the one we're in and try to make the best choices that come to us here. That's what's important.
It
So
is
it's just,
fascinating in the big
yeah.
picture, though, to
Mm-hmm.
understand that this diversity, we should take that on as a lesson, that this is why things are in conflict here and why we need to look at things in the same bigger picture viewpoint. What have you observed that's most interesting about how fear or love is approached in these other realities? What was something that stood out for you that you found to be interesting in its diversity?
Well, I'd say that really the most outstanding thing, the thing I took away from it more than any other, is not about their differences, but about their sameness. How it is that these realities are very similar. Yes, they're couched in different ways. They don't always look like human beings. They can be something else. So there's lots of diversity in it, but it's all the same in the sense of what's going on, how it's going on. It's just different shapes and different forms and different beliefs. But when you look at it, you see that it's really pretty much all the same. It's individuated pieces of consciousness in a social arrangement that is interacting with each other, having to make choices. And that's the same everywhere. That's what it's all about. And that's the way they all are. And their differences aren't really the important thing. Now, to the system, that may be important to choose what's the most efficient and effective way to help individuated units of consciousness to evolve. But to the individuals there, it's all basically the same game. You're in an environment, you have relationships with others, some like you, some very different than you, and how do you make the choices that you make? So that game is just universal across all of them and for all things. The dogs and cats have that same thing going on, you know, so that's the game. And I think that's the thing that stood out to me more than anything else is that, yes, there's lots and lots of differences, but the differences in structure and the differences in form don't really make a whole lot of difference. They're all doing the same thing in their own way. That was the point. That was kind of the lesson that I learned from those observations, is that it's not about whether it's better to, you know, be in a humanoid shape or be in some other kind of shape. That's irrelevant. The point is, how well do you make the choices that you have? How much love do you base your choices on? Or how much self-centeredness do you base your choices on? How much fear? That's the key thing everywhere. That's the key thing for dogs and cats and people and funny-looking critters and other realities. That's the key thing, and it's the same all over. That's the important takeaway, not the differences.
Thank you for that bigger picture perspective, and I think you're one of the only few people, if maybe the only one, who can tell about, who can describe and compare and help us to learn about how that is the most important thing. That's part of your mission, I guess, that you were given. And that's really very interesting. Thank you, Tom.